with some super fancy pinwheels that are easy to customize at home and have a pop of flavor that's going to leave your family wanting more. When you wander your local grocery store, you may wander up to the butcher counter, look behind the glass, and see some beautiful flank steak pinwheels. They're normally pretty expensive, but flank steak in general is normally not too expensive. So you might be asking, why are those pinwheels so expensive? Well, there's a lot of labor that goes into it when you're doing it at mass like that. But they're super easy to customize, they're wonderful for the family, and they cook really quick. Let's have some fun with these. I got in front of me a beautiful piece of flank steak that I got from my local butcher, Sausage Brothers, up in Skytook, Oklahoma. I picked this flank steak because it's actually really flat and even, so it's going to make a really easy surface for us to roll. But I need to get it a little bit thinner. So flat is good, but thinner is even more important. So since it's in a cryovac, I can actually leave it in this bag and go ahead and do the flattening with a mallet right here in this bag. If it wasn't in the cryovac, you probably want to sandwich it between some wax paper or some saran wrap to kind of keep your kitchen clean and keep meat from flinging everywhere. But I think it's going to work fine in this bag. We're not going for paper thin, we're just going for about 1/4 inch all the way through with your good meat mallet. You want to work your way from the outsides in, trying to get everything as flat as possible. Remember, the whole key to a pinwheel is the fact that we're going to roll it, and if this meat's too thick, it's not going to roll well. So we want to keep it nice and thin. Almost there. I can tell it's definitely expanded in the bag. It was taking up about 2/3 of the bag now. Now I'm about 90%. You want to feel around for any places that are a little bit thicker and flatten those, because the flatter it is, the more even it's going to cook. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Also a little tired. So take a break, grab a cold drink. We're going to get these things unwrapped, ready to roll out. You want to examine your flank steak and see if there's any trimming that's going to be required. There's a little bit of a membrane on this one. I'm just going to take my knife, trim up some of this. When the flank is removed, there's a membrane on it. If your butcher's pretty good, normally they take most of the membrane off. There's not much left on this one. If they didn't, you may have a little bit of knife work you need to do. It's not too bad. You can peel most of it away with your hands and just use your knife to kind of make the final cut to remove it from the meat. Now, I've never found a real good rhyme or reason on what side to use on the outside or the inside of the flank steak. So my rule of thumb is whatever side has the most membrane that's a little hard to get to is what I'm going to put on the outside, because that membrane is going to burn up in the fire. The membrane on the inside sometimes won't melt away. So I put the membrane that is the hardest to remove toward the outside of the fire. Here's what's really fun about these pinwheels is the traditional pinwheel is spinach. It's some kind of like a provolone cheese, which we're going to use here in a little bit. And it's some seasonings and stuff like that, but every now and then they'll put a mushroom reduction or something kind of different in it. But really, some kind of cream cheese, Boursin cheese, provolone cheese, some spinach, that's kind of traditional. But the neat thing with the pinwheel is you can really make this up and do as much or as crazy as you want to go. We're going to season the outside when it's all done before we cut it into steaks. But before we do that, I want to put a little bit of seasoning on the inside. So I'm going to use my trusty DB 180 all-purpose. You don't need a lot because there's a lot of flavor on the inside. I just want to have a little bit of that salt profile. DB 180 is nice because there's a little bit of butter in it. There's a little bit of onion and garlic in it. I'm a big pimento cheese fan. So today we're going to get a little bit messy. We're going to do some pimento cheese. You want to spread it as thin and as evenly as possible. All right, now that that's pretty even, we're going to go for our next layer. Now the pimento cheese is going to start melting once we get it on the grill. So the next layer I want is something that's going to hold it in a little bit. So we're going to go with some prosciutto. Now you can use bacon if you'd like, but what I really like about prosciutto is it's nice and thin, so it doesn't require a lot of cooking time. It's just going to warm up a little bit on the grill. It holds that layer of cheese in real well. And my favorite thing about it in this recipe is what's going to go on next is the spinach, and the fat in the pimento cheese is going to mix with the fat in the prosciutto, and it's going to coat that spinach. It's going to make that spinach kind of stay wilty and oily. It's not going to have that kind of uncooked, crunchy inside. You can put as much of this prosciutto as you want or you can afford. Prosciutto is definitely not cheap, but man alive is it good. I actually prefer prosciutto when I'm wrapping things like asparagus for the grill because it crisps up a lot easier than bacon, so I can focus on cooking the asparagus and not trying to get my bacon crispy while I overcook the asparagus. So I wrap a lot of things in prosciutto. It also tends to tighten up when it cooks, which is a nice little aspect when you're wrapping things in it because it holds everything together real nice as opposed to wanting to fall off. All right, so that's looking real good. I'm going to come back in with our spinach. Now make sure you wash your spinach. All those weird outbreaks of different foodborne illnesses that happen because of spinach is normally because people don't wash them. Now last but not least, I'm going to be a little traditional with it, and we're going to throw some provolone on it. I'm going to cover the whole thing with provolone. We are looking good there. All right, the hardest part of this thing is going to be rolling and tying. So what I like to do is get all my twine prepared ahead of time. So I cut all the twine to the length I think I'm going to need. And what I'm going to actually do is slide these underneath the piece of meat, kind of wiggle their way through, because the more I can have them in place when this thing wants to start unrolling on me, the easier it's going to be to tie it up. Now you're taking a wild guess at how many pieces you're going to need, but I like to tie up about every 2 inches because I'm going to cut these into about 2.5 inch steak rolls when we're all done. This gets a little hard, so you just want to work real slow. Try to hold everything in place as you roll. Get everything tucked up as you roll. Don't be afraid, it will get a little messy. That's all part of the fun. All right, now we tie. You can do a fancy butcher's knot if you know how to do it. You just tie a nice tight knot. That's fine too. One trick if you've never tied these before is you go around one time under and go back under again, and when you cinch it, as long as everything's in place, normally it holds that cinch pretty tight. And you can come back in and finish off your knot. All right, so this is what your pinwheel looks like. Like I said, it gets a little messy on the end because you're squeezing all that stuff out of it, but this is what it looks like when it's whole. Now I like to season the outside when it's one big loaf, because once you get into steaks, sometimes it's a little hard to kind of move them around. Today for our seasoning, we're going to use Hardcore Carnivore Red. It's going to add some really cool color to it. If you don't feel like it's moist enough on the outside, you can always add a little bit of olive oil to make it stick. So we're going to take a nice sharp knife. You're going to come in between all your twine cuts, and you want to cut these off. So this one's going to be a little difficult because it's an end cut, so I might sacrifice some of this on the end, but it'll make it for a more even cooking steak. So we'll move that out of the way. And then I'm going in between all of my strings. And there's your pinwheel steaks with all your goodness in between them. Now, like I said, the thinner you pound these out, the quicker and easier they're going to cook. So we tried to get that as thin and uniform as possible. That's what you're going to be temping though, because the prosciutto's already cooked. Your cheese just has to melt. So when it comes down to getting these things done, you're shooting for that medium rare to medium temperature on your flank steak to make sure that the meat is actually done. All right, we got the grill fired up. Hasty Bake is in the bake position. It's around 375 degrees. We're going to put these things on directly over the fire, let them come up to temp. Now these pinwheels are on the grill. We're hovering about 350 to 370 degrees right now. Now, as hot as that is, I want to gently bake them. I don't want to hard sear them because you got all that cheese inside that's just going to melt out if you put a lot of heat on it. So we're really going to try to bring them up to temp, kind of a slow medium pace. We really don't want to hard sear them right now. Going to let them pick up some of that smoke that's in that natural charcoal. We'll finish them off. I'm looking for an internal temperature of about 135 degrees. Now I temped all these. They're around 134 to 138. I think one of them got up to 140, which is still fine. The important thing to remember is they're still beef, so we still need to rest them. So we rested them for about 8, maybe 10 minutes. You don't want to rest them too long, because if you rest them too long, that cheese on the inside, that provolone is going to kind of harden up. But you want to rest long enough to kind of let those muscle fibers relax. Remember, it is flank steak, and flank steak can be a little tough. Pounding it out will help. Making it nice and thin in a pinwheel will help, but resting also really makes a big difference. Crack into one side, get all the flavor in one bite. So get the spinach, get the prosciutto, get that beautiful pimento. Here we go. Such good flavor. Not only that, but that spinach has a nice light, refreshing flavor that kind of goes along with it. So it makes it taste a little less heavy than it normally would. That prosciutto did a great job of holding that spinach in place. The Hardcore Carnivore Red put a wonderful color on these. It almost looks like it's smoked, even though they're only on the grill for about 20 minutes. To recap, we did have them in the bake position on your Hasty Bake. We had a 2-zone fire set up, but it was set up for grilling. We cooked them about 300 to 350 or so was the temperature on them by the time everything settled in. Man, this is so good. It's a great balance of flavor. Heat from the pimento, savory from the prosciutto. I can't tell you enough about these. There's not a lot of uses for flank steak out there, truthfully. It's kind of hard to find things that'll work for a tough piece of meat like that. A lot of people like it for fajitas. I myself prefer skirt steak for that type of thing. But this holds up so well to this type of recipe, man, I would recommend flank and this kind of thing all day long, any day. Thanks for joining us. We like to get creative with these. We want you to get creative with them. Fire up your Hasty Bake. Try some new recipes on the grill. Try some stuff you've never tried before. If you really like it, let us know about it. Find us on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok now. All the important places. Continue to track us down. We're going to continue to pump these out. Thanks for joining us.